everyone. My name is Michelle, an education counselor from INTI International University and Colleges Malaysia. INTI offers a wide range of programs like business, arts and design, physiotherapy, law, and more. One of our most famous programs will be our 3+0 business program, whereby we partner with the University of Hertfordshire, UK. In other words, you will be able to obtain a foreign degree at an affordable cost. If you're interested to study in INTI and would like to find out more but you're unsure how due to the current lockdown situation, don't fret. Stay at home and let me help you. Do book an online counseling session with me as per the details seen. Stay home, stay safe, and see you online soon.
Our next speaker on day 4 of our conference, where we are looking at the future of skills, is Dr. Sue McNamara from 6 Seconds, the Emotional Intelligence organization. And she is going to be addressing the question, the why of emotional intelligence. Now, Dr. Sue has over 25 years of experience in the fields of leadership and training, and over 15 years in the fields of education. She's passionate about supporting organizations to create climates where people can thrive. And she works with leaders, educators, and change makers to integrate emotional intelligence into their programs. She advocates an evidence-based approach, blending strong data with practice processes to improve learning and the application of EQ skills. In the session, Sue shares with us what the impact is of emotional intelligence and how it can increase a company's profitability by up to 22 times when emotional intelligence is a key focus. But it's important to know it's not a nice to have, it's essential to relationships and to life success. Welcome, Sue McNamara, Dr. Sue, to our Inspired conference. Inspired, are you future ready? And I think that is such a relevant topic for the field of speciality that you are working in, and that is emotional intelligence. So thank you so much for giving us your time and sharing your expertise in this really, really important set of competencies and skills that I believe everybody needs to develop.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for inviting me to share. And I think that what you're actually doing here, bringing together this group of experts from around the world to support people to create their own positive growth, aligns with what I do and what our organization does. So I'm delighted to be here. So thank you so much.
Sue, let's jump right in and start with something that I think many people don't have a real understanding of, and that is exactly what is emotional intelligence. Could you perhaps give us a definition?
Absolutely. So there are many academic definitions and beautifully crafted definitions of what emotional intelligence is. And at 6 Seconds, we've distilled it down to one very simple idea, that it's being smarter with your feelings. So that's it, quite simply. So we all have emotions. They're universal. Every single human being has them. And as Josh, our CEO, says, we can be emotionally smart with them, or we can be emotionally idiotic with them. And so emotional intelligence is learning to utilize that data, because emotions are purely data. and to actually recognize those emotions, and then to decide, is that emotion useful for this moment in time? Or do I need to shift that emotion and generate a different emotion which will be more useful for me at this moment in time? So there are no good or bad or positive or negative emotions. They're just data, simply data. And so for us, the definition is to be smarter with that data and to utilize it to your best effect and to the best effect of other people as well.
That's a great definition, because so many people would say control your emotions or control yourself, and you are using the term use that
Mm-hmm.
information or that data, because emotions for many people, when you just use the word, especially in the corporate environment, it has a very bad name.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think it's really interesting. You know, for me, I utilized the 6 seconds model of emotional intelligence for my PhD. And the reason I did is because it's based on neuroscience. It's based on the scientific field of understanding this emotional data and our brains. And no matter what you say, you may hear in the boardroom, just leave emotions out of this. That's physiologically impossible to do. You cannot do it. So you can ignore that emotion, but we know when we ignore an emotion that actually it escalates, or we don't utilize that data. We can choose to try and control that emotion. But again, if we try and control something, then that's not the same as just opening up the message. So, for example, if I feel frustrated, then what is that message to me? It might feel uncomfortable because I'm frustrated, but the emotion is okay. I can think, okay, something is blocking my way, or I need to do something differently. So that's the message. So then I can shift my thoughts and my emotion and shift my action as well. But if I don't pay attention to that, then unfortunately, I'm probably going to make a decision that's incorrect, as I would if I was ignoring the logic also. So really it's about using both your IQ and your emotional data to make better choices and decisions. And whether you're sat around a boardroom table, or whether you're sat in a school, whether you're in a family unit, if we are overrun by this emotional data and we ignore it and it escalates and we're not being smart with it, then it can lead to catastrophic choices and catastrophic decisions. Whereas if we're smarter with it and just simply see it as a piece of data, what does it mean? Okay, it means this, or it means that, then we can utilize it.
It's very interesting, the approach. I think it gives people a sense of where you can feel lost, where you can drown in these emotions. If you start looking at it with a different lens,
Mm.
then it will give you a feeling of, I don't want to use the word control, but it would give you more direction. It would help you to move forward. So you've
Yeah.
mentioned it's very interesting, the fact that you've mentioned two things I'd like us to explore a little bit further. The one is the connection between neuroscience, or understanding neuroscience and emotions. And the second thing is where you said that you cannot hide it, you cannot stop it, you cannot, it's physically impossible not to have emotions. So how does that work? And your insights here would be very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. So if we think back to, when we were cavemen and women and we had to react very, very quickly in response to something. So if a saber-toothed tiger was running towards us, we needed a quick message to say, fight this, run away from it, or freeze and try and hide from it. So those are those three responses. And that's what emotions do, because emotions are 80,000 times faster than logic. So in 0.25 of a second, you will get an emotional response to a stimulus. So the stimulus comes into your brain, and in 0.25 of a second, chemicals, neurohormones are released into your body to give you a message. And that message is fight, flee, or freeze if we see this as a threat. So if we see this stimulus as a threat, then the quick and dirty route of responding to that emotional data is fight, flee, or freeze. Now, unfortunately, our brains haven't developed as quickly as other things really in relation to this. And so what we've actually found is that if we're in the workplace and our boss comes towards us with a frown on their face and looking really angry, our brain will immediately send a message to us to fight, flee, or freeze. And what will happen is you will respond in your normal way, in your pattern. So we have neural pathways that we form that create these patterns. When we're emotionally hijacked, then what happens is when we're in that situation, in 0.25 of a second, our brain will go, what do you normally do? What would you normally do in this situation? And you will react in that situation. So this is when if you look on the sports field, and a classic one, I think is the incident in the Italy-France World Cup with Zidane, and where he headbutted somebody. Now he knew logically that wasn't a smart thing to do. The World Cup was riding on this. It was his last game. He could have been a hero, but instead he reacted and was sent off. And France went down to 10 men and ultimately lost. But we see reactions like that happening every day in the workplace. Egos get in the way. People perceive threat where there's no threat. So our brains automatically respond in this primal way. So when we're smarter with this emotional data, we can pause to think, what is this message? What is this emotional data? And we can create different options to deal with these situations that we could perceive as threat, so that we're being smarter with this emotional data.
So definitely, as you were saying, this is not just something that happens outside of work. It happens everywhere you go, everywhere you live, whenever you have interactions with other people, even I think virtually, reacting to a message on your WhatsApp or an email, because you also don't have the benefit of having that conversation or that physical presence with somebody that could help you maybe interpret something differently. And in this world that we are living in now, how do you think that people, for example, you talked about flight and fright, do you think people perceive COVID as the saber-toothed tiger? And how does this fear that we're constantly living in impact on our behavior?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's really interesting from just my observations really in relation to my interactions from the very beginning of this COVID situation. I think what I was observing is that depending on people's brain styles and depending on their pre-existing patterns, some people are risk averse, and that's fine. They're more evaluative, and so they tend to evaluate things very carefully, whereas other people, their brain styles are such that they will take risk. And it was really interesting that I observed people going into their patterns. So it was, as so astutely observed there, this was the saber-toothed tiger, really. My goodness, everything changed, didn't it, overnight? It was what the world was just a completely different place. So in people's brains, what's occurring is this stimulus is coming in. They're being bombarded with these messages, and I know we've spoken before, these words like social isolation and the downturn and fear. And so people will react in pattern. And their brains will be generating emotions to say, okay, this is a potential threat, but do you just want to react? in your normal pattern, or do you want to carefully utilize that data and assess how you can move forward? Now, people that I observed in my interactions, both in the corporate world, in education, and personally, were at different stages with that. So some people very quickly jumped on board and said, okay, this is a threat. However, there are things that we can do within that. Yeah. So in the 6 seconds model of emotional intelligence, one of the competencies is optimism and exercising optimism. And I think that really came into play. Those people that had higher levels of exercising their optimism were the ones that were able to create different pathways forward. So they could see that they were in this situation, but what are the alternatives? How can we quickly change? How can we quickly adapt? I personally am an evaluative person. So, I can tend to overthink things, whereas, I'm lucky the people within our global team and within our team, some of those have very different brain styles, and we complement each other. Because, I could be the one that's saying, well, hang on a minute, have we thought about this, this, and this? And somebody else can be saying, hey, let's do this, let's do this, let's do this. So I think it's really important in teams and in organizations and in families that we observe in situations like this, and we acknowledge that people think very differently, and we can co-create ways forward utilizing our emotional intelligence and utilizing our different brain styles as well.
So that's so important, and it's a message that's been echoed across many of these sessions in our conference. Many of the speakers are talking about optimism. We know also Martin Seligman and positive psychology, and Dr. Helen Maffini spoke about mindfulness and being aware of just really noticing your emotions. But can we go back to the model? Because I think there's two things that our audience will really benefit from. One is for you to talk us a little bit through the emotional, the 6 seconds model of emotional intelligence, which I personally have been using ever since I came to be trained by the organization, and I found it so useful. And secondly, you talked about brain style. So maybe we can delve into these two and get a bit of a deeper understanding of what that is.
Yeah, absolutely. So the model that you can see on your screen now actually is the macro model. So in this model, you can see that there are 3 areas. There's know yourself, which is about your self-awareness. So how aware are you of what you're thinking and what you're feeling, and what are your patterns? What are your regular patterns? So this is about self-awareness. Now, awareness isn't enough. We also need then to be able to make decisions around that awareness. So you'll notice that the colors here. So we have blue for self-awareness, this know yourself. And this is about reflection, the reflection of the water, so that we can actually think about and feel those emotions, to understand what it is we are actually feeling, and to be able to name those emotions. Then we go into the choose yourself area, which is red. And this is about self-management. So this is the area that says stop, and let's analyze all this data that we have, and let's choose something different, or something that is appropriate, so that we're not just reacting, we are responding. And that brings us around to this 3rd area that you can see, which is green, which is go. And this is about the self-direction. So this is about the why am I going to make this choice or decision? How does it align with my value system? How does it align with other people and their best interests as well as my own? So this is the macro level. And as we do this on a daily basis, what am I thinking? What am I feeling? What options do I have? And what's my empathic and principled choice? When we do this and we become more aware of this, then we make smarter decisions and we make smarter choices, and we're not reactionary, and we can actually utilize the whole of our brain to best effect. So that brings us on to the next graphic that you can see on the screen here, which is going into detail about how we can put this know, choose, and give into action. And that know, choose, and give is like a propeller on a ship. We need to keep it turning. We need to be using all of it. So in this graphic that you can see, you'll see that there are 8 competencies. And these 8 competencies support you to be smarter with your emotions. So you can see in the blue area, the know yourself area, we have enhanced emotional literacy. So this is about being able to name any emotion. So when you get that release of chemicals in your body, you can say, I'm feeling X, I'm feeling Y, I'm feeling this. So at this level, it's about naming singular and multiple emotions. And the better you get at this, then the more able you are to understand that emotional data, your emotional data. So then the next part that you can see is about recognizing your patterns. So our brain forms patterns for efficiency. So for example, when somebody is listening to this session, they'll learn some things. And then maybe in a week, they might come across something similar again, but they'll already have a basis for this because they'll have started to form these neural pathways. Now, that's a great benefit, so that we don't have to relearn things every single time we come across them. So patterns are for efficiency. We sometimes do need to react as well. If a car is coming towards me, I need to get out of the way very, very quickly in 0.25 of a second. But I need to be aware that if, somebody is just questioning me, that's not an actual threat. So I don't want to respond in the same way to that. But if I have a pattern for that, that's how I will respond. So this is ultimately in the blue area about naming your emotions and knowing how you would normally respond in a situation. Because once you have that awareness, as you mentioned, some of your speakers have spoken about awareness. Once we have that awareness, then we have the ability to change or to choose to do the initial action that we were going to do. But we're being conscious about it and we're choosing it.
And it's so interesting.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, no, I mean, just so interesting, the adults that I work with and the leadership training that I do, when I talk about emotions, how little vocabulary people actually have to describe emotions precisely. And in other languages, what I found, for example, working with people who are Bahasa Malay speakers, the exact vocabulary do not always exist. So people find it really hard to define what they're feeling if there's not a word that they can use to describe it. And so often I find when I ask people, okay, take 1 minute and write down as many emotions or vocabulary, that 8 words or 10 words is what they come up with. And so maybe it's an educational task to start educating kids from when they're very small and equip them with this emotional vocabulary.
Yes, absolutely. And there's, 2 things I'd just like to follow up on there. Number one, there are over 3,000 words in the English language for emotions. I don't know about any other language, but I always ask our practitioner groups, how many emotions are there in your language? And it varies. But I know in the English language, it's over 3,000 words. And I've had the same experience as you, adults, very senior positions in organizations, normally, between 8 and 12 emotions in a minute. And it's typically the core emotions, happy, sad, angry, frustrated, etc. And I think it's really interesting to note, the second point is that all of these competencies that you can see on the screen in this model are learnable. This isn't about personality. It's not just about being lucky in the gene pool and acquiring these. These are all measurable, they're all learnable, and most importantly, they're all actionable. So you can take this and put it into action. And that's how the 6 seconds model of emotional intelligence was designed, specifically to say, take these tools, take these methodologies and apply them. So absolutely, you know, and once you've got that self-awareness, which is a great gift, and you can, as you say, educate children from a very early age. And we have a curriculum called the self-science curriculum, which is it's just been updated actually with the latest edition, and we have 74 lessons which actually help students to develop in these areas, these 8 areas that you can see here. And they're global lessons. They've been developed by a group of global experts as well. So I think you're right. I think, you know, if we can educate children from a very early age, that's really beneficial. I also think that I also know that actually there's no limit. You can learn this when you're 99 if you want to.
That's very encouraging, because people, it's no use, as you say, that I learn about it, I'm self-aware, but what do I do about it? And can I change it? It's don't feel stuck in your situation. Don't feel helpless, because you can make a change. And I think that is the great, and you can measure the change, right? But maybe you can talk about the measurement a bit later as well. So now that you are, you know, if we look at the second part of the model and the detail around that.
Great, yeah. So in the red area that you can see here, this is choose yourself. So this is ultimately saying, stop, let's analyze this data from the blue area, and let's analyze, you know, the logic around this, and let's then decide what we're going to do. So in this area, we have a consequential thinking. And this is about weighing up the pros and cons of that decision from an emotional and a logical perspective, and saying, okay, what are the costs and the benefits of the action that I'm going to take? Then we have navigating emotions. And it was interesting, Elmarie said that I hadn't used the word control. And that's very specific and very accurate, because we talk about navigating. So if we think of where a ship sailing, you know, 200 years ago, sailors used to use the North Star to navigate in the Northern Hemisphere. And so that would say, okay, I need to turn left, I need to turn right, I need to do this, I need to do that. And this is what we want people to do with emotional data too, to actually say, I know where I'm going, but what do I need to do with this emotional data? How can I navigate this? So not suppress it, not control it, not overreact on it, but actually just take that emotional data and say, okay, is this useful? Is this going to actually get me what I want at this moment in time? Is it going to help me to help others to get what they want at this time? Because so many times we hear people saying, I don't know why I said that. I don't know why I did that. And it's because we're not utilizing this data. We're not navigating these emotions, and we're not being smart with this emotional data. So we want to navigate. So then we've got intrinsic motivation. And this increasing intrinsic motivation is really looking at that energy that you get, so that you're not reliant on other people, or you're not reliant on having praise, or you're not reliant on getting that bonus. But this is about being intrinsically motivated to move towards something. And if you notice the word motivation and emotion, for anybody that's listening that's a Latin scholar, they come from the same root word, which is to move. So emotions move us towards or away from something. So if we are navigating and utilizing our emotional data, then we can become more motivated and move towards things that are meaningful for us and for other people. So it's about energy. Emotions are energy, and motivation is about utilizing that energy to move towards something. And then you mentioned Martin Seligman, and this exercising optimism is something that is in here as well. Because if we can't create a pathway forward. If we only see option A or option B, we may be missing something really, really important. So that model of thinking of a challenge as temporary, isolated to one area, and with effort you can do something about that. Going back to the question about COVID-19, if we can perceive it as, yes, it's very different, yes, it might not be ideal, yes, we're in this dreadful situation, but we know that we have options within those parameters. So what can we do? So this exercising optimism helps us to create those pathways forward. So those 4 components combined help us to choose ourselves and to manage what we're going to do with this emotional data and this logical data, to choose something that's best for others and for ourselves.
That's fantastic. And that's, I think as you're talking through the model, I'm also thinking it's not something that just happens in sequence. It's something that would happen simultaneously, right? So as your value system, what you want to achieve in life is always going to weigh back against what you choose and what emotions you're experiencing. So it's important to see this model as an integrated, it has distinct phases or areas, but it also means as a human being, you don't think in separate compartments. So it's a fantastic model, and I wonder, as you spoke about you're thinking about other people. What is the consequence does a person with high emotional intelligence, what impact does a person with high emotional intelligence have on an organization, for example? I mean, I know that you've done some studies on CEOs and actually the company bottom line, and that would be interesting to hear a little bit more about.
Yeah, absolutely. And just, I think it's really important in terms of something that you just said, that the model is circular. And it's circular because we may need to use different parts of this model at different times. So it's not, sequential in terms of, it's not linear. So, the third area, this green area, which is about give yourself. So this is about your direction. Why? Why are you going to choose one option rather than another? And empathy is within this. So increase empathy. Yes. And also pursue noble goals. So pursue noble goals is about your value system. And it's about following that purpose, a long-term vision, not just a goal that you want to achieve in the next year or 2 years, but this is when you come to the end of your days and you look back on your life and you think, how do I want to be remembered? What's this legacy that I want to leave? Have you been on a daily basis supporting that legacy? Have you been moving towards that in the small decisions that you make? So if I may give you an example, my noble goal is to support myself and others to create their own positive growth. And I can do that anywhere, anytime, whether it's smiling at somebody in the street because they look a little bit down, or whether it's back to your question about organizations, whether it's actually supporting somebody to grow, whether it's giving people space to find what their own growth is. So, this green part of this model is really incredibly important. And for me, it pulls it together. It's what is my empathic and my principled choice. And Elmarie, going back to your question about how does that impact organizations, I'd just like everybody that's listening in on this to think, if we went about our lives being smarter with this emotional data, and if we had more insight and connection and had more purpose, which this model supports people to do, how would the world look, in a year, in 2 years, in 5 years, in 100 years' time? How would that be? And we have done a lot of research around this, and we do on an annual basis research around this. And it was really interesting. There is one piece of data that I think is quite interesting to share in relation to emotional intelligence. And if organizations have emotional intelligence as a priority, what happens? And you can see here in this graphic that that we've got on the screen at the moment. So in organizations where EQ is seen as a priority, organizations are 22 times more likely to be high performing. Now, another
In this
statistic.
case, for emotional intelligence, right?
Absolutely. If you put people at the center of your decision making, then people will buy into processes, they will buy into procedures, they will be intrinsically motivated, they can align their values, they will be more effective because they are seen as important human beings to the organization. So they're seen as contributing to the organization. They're seen as being important to the organization. So just when you think of that, the emotions that are being generated in you are motivating you. They're emotions that are linked to trust as well. And trust is an emotion in itself. And trust says, yes, engage in this or quickly move away from this. So in organizations that have low levels of trust, and trust is linked to empathy and to emotional intelligence, in organizations that have higher levels of trust, then people will follow leaders more so. They will engage in teams and contribute with one another. So to create that connection with one another also, and ultimately be more effective, not only operationally, but in terms of that long-term strategic vision as well. And, again, we asked a number of years ago, actually, we asked organizations in our vitality survey in 2017, what are the top issues in your organization? And again, you can see on the screen here that in this complex VUCA world, people, a lot of organizations that I observe, when something needs to change, they will look at the processes, the procedures, the policies, etc. But when we ask people this question, you can see here that 70% of the top issues in organizations are people issues.
Yeah.
Now, in order to solve people issues, you need emotional intelligence. And only 29.5%, as you can see here, were actually those technical financial. But even when you dig deep into those technical financial issues, you can see that even some of those are related to people also. So you can't solve people issues by not being emotionally intelligent. And so that's why the previous statistic around organizations that put EQ at the center and it's seen as a priority are 22 times more high performing than other organizations. So it's not just a nice to have. We hear this emotions and emotional intelligence. It's not just a nice thing to have. People, emotions drive people, people drive performance, and performance drives outcomes, whether that's in an organization, whether that's in a family, whether that's in a school. Ultimately, when you think emotions are 80,000 times faster than logic, they're there for a reason. They're there for a function, to move you away from something or towards something. To me, it's idiotic not to actually see this not as a soft skill, but as something that needs to be embedded in every human activity, everything that we do.
That's a very good point. Let's not talk about this as a soft skill, because by calling it a soft skill, you're already downplaying the importance of it. And
Absolutely.
as you also mentioned, it impacts then also on schools, on academic performance, on your relationships in your family, with your spouse, with your children, with, I mean, everything that you do, because it's so fundamental. If people can just think about this, that emotions drive thinking, emotions are at the heart of everything. And that would, you know, as I said, it's a fantastic business case for organizations to really, really take this seriously, especially, I mean, it's always important, but I think at this given time, that is something that really needs very, very specific attention. Um, so you
Absolutely. And
mentioned, yeah, sorry, yes.
no, that's okay. I was just going to say, you know, the research that we've done also from the SAY assessment, which is an assessment where we can actually measure emotional intelligence. And we're not measuring emotional intelligence because, you know, we don't need you to get an A star in this. What we need you to do is to be able to utilize your emotional intelligence. So in our assessment, we have a measure of your emotional intelligence, but also a measure of the outcomes that we know are important in life. And you can see here again on the screen that we have these 4 specific areas that are highly correlated with emotional intelligence. So we know if people have higher levels of emotional intelligence and they're utilizing that effectively, then these 4 areas that you can see here will see better outcomes. So you can see here relationships. So relationships are about productive, healthy connectivity with other people. And this is both in personal communities, but also in our business lives. You know, if we want to create teams, organizations, families that actually connect more, collaborate more, and therefore achieve more, we need to know about relationships. So there's a high correlation between EQ and relationships, as there is with well-being. And Elle-Marie, I think it's something that's really interesting that I know we've spoken about before in terms of the anxiety that we're seeing and the fear that we're seeing. And well-being in this model is about both mental balance and physical health. So when we are able to say an emotion is just an emotion, it's giving me a message. If I'm feeling anxious about something, what does that mean? What do I have to change? What do I have to do? Then that increases our level of well-being. And the other areas are about effectiveness. So this is about accomplishing the task at hand, but it includes decision making, making smarter decisions, and also how we can positively influence other people to make smarter decisions and choices as well. And the final area is about quality of life. And this is about the goals we set for ourselves and the satisfaction with these achievements. So going back to the point that emotional intelligence isn't just a nice to have, there are outcomes that are pervasive in everything that we do, both personally and professionally. And I think that that's really, really important to remember that when we utilize our EQ, then we see higher levels of success in these specific areas. And when we translate that into families or we translate that into organizations, then again we have more collaborative, more loving, more caring, empathic family units, community units, and organizational units as well, with higher levels of trust.
It's such a good case for people to get involved and to learn more about emotional intelligence and work on their own emotional intelligence. So you spoke about tests, and you mentioned a number of assessments that you do. Because I can, you know, for me, if I know what's my baseline, I can see what I need to improve in, and I can actually measure the success over time, which gives me a feeling of satisfaction as well. So what kind of assessments do you have, and how are these assessments used, Sue?
Yeah, thank you. So we have what we call a SAY assessment, and it's an assessment that measures these 8 competencies of emotional intelligence, as well as the outcomes that I've just mentioned. They are self-assessments. So you are basically when you answer the questions that are contained within this, articulating how you're utilizing your emotional intelligence at this moment in time. And it's a snapshot in time. It's not permanent. You can learn, as you say, Anne-Marie, in terms of where am I at the moment? How am I using this effectively? Do I want to utilize this competence a little bit more? Maybe this competence a little bit less. But it's about utilizing that data. So we also have 360 assessments, and 360 assessments measure, as a leader, where do I perceive I am, and where do all the other people that I interact with on a daily basis perceive I am. And that's wonderful for giving a leader a quick snapshot into not only how they perceive they are utilizing their EQ, but also, are they actually actioning that EQ? Are other people perceiving the same? And sometimes we see leaders that underestimate themselves, which can be very stressful if you perceive you're not doing this. But sometimes we have leaders that overestimate, and that's fine. It's irrelevant. The important point is this is where you are, and you can do something to move forward with this information, because ultimately people are thinking and feeling these things anyway. And as a leader, if I know that, I can do something about it. As you say, Anne-Marie, you have that baseline. So we have a suite of reports that come from the SAY assessment. 2 of them I've just mentioned there, the development, the leadership report, but also we have something called brain profiles. And the brain profiles are really interesting in terms of being able to action your emotional intelligence. And we've got 18 talents. These, you can think of them like apps on your phone that you can utilize at any given point to say, okay, I need to utilize this talent slightly more in order to connect at this moment, or I need to be a little bit more autonomous, or I need to evaluate a little bit more. And you can see on your screen here that we have these 18 talents. And these 18 talents, you can see, are placed on 3 continuums. So the first continuum is about how does your brain like to focus? When you walk into a room, what does your brain notice? Does it notice the people sat around the table and the mood? Or does it notice the data and the statistics on the wall? It really, there's no wrong and no right. It's just an awareness of this is my pattern. So then the next continuum that you can see here is about decisions. How do I make these decisions? Am I evaluative or am I a risk taker? And these talents that you can see, these 6 talents on each of these parameters, these scales, helps you to move from one to another. To A, know your pattern, but B, be able to do something about it, so be very actionable. And the third one is about where do you get your drive from? Is it from the short term or that long-term vision? So these 18 talents can actually help you to action and put into play your emotional intelligence as well, so that you have tangible tools to do this. And we can look at this in terms of teams. We have a dashboard, and the dashboard will give you a quick insight into where the strengths are of your team, where you might need to just pay a little bit more attention in your team as well. So these are just some of the assessments. We have many more assessments, around change and trust, but these are our fundamental assessments to help people put emotional intelligence into action. And, there is another really exciting one, which is called the neural network, which is based on artificial intelligence. And you take the SAY assessment, and the report that you get actually gives you these 4 outcomes in terms of well-being, quality of life, relationships, and effectiveness. And it tells you which competencies would be most useful for you personally to action in order to achieve more success in each of those areas. So we basically taught the machine to predict each person individually how they answer, the levels that they answer, their questioning style, etc. Which competencies would be most beneficial to help them to achieve more in those outcomes. So very exciting.
It's exciting, and what's great about this is, because it's not tangible. You talk about emotional intelligence, you can't touch it, can't see it, but people say improve your emotional intelligence. And I've always found whether it's around thinking or around emotional intelligence, it helps to have tangible tools. It helps to have structures and things that can help you hook this onto and practical tools so that you have stuff that you can do instead of just this vague sort of generalized statements that people make. So how does a person, maybe let's talk about 6 seconds as an organization. Why is it called 6 seconds?
Yes, well, it's a really interesting, we get asked that question a lot. And again, it goes back to the neuroscience around emotional data. And Josh, our CEO, has done a beautiful 2-minute video, actually, which I think would be really beneficial to show, which articulates beautifully why we're called 6 seconds. But in a nutshell, it's because we have this emotional response to a stimulus that comes into our brain. And that emotional response lasts for about 6 seconds. So if I feel angry about something, that chemical reaction will last for about 6 seconds. It's released into the bloodstream, goes throughout our bodies, and it's there for about 6 seconds. So ultimately, we have a window of 6 seconds to choose to regenerate that emotion or to shift and navigate that emotion to a different one that might be more useful for us to get us the outcome that we want for that moment in time, and to give us the opportunity to provide the outcome for other people. So it's like 6 seconds is a window of opportunity. A window of opportunity where we can choose a different response, a different emotional response. So ultimately, if you feel anything over 6 seconds, for longer than 6 seconds, you're ultimately choosing to recreate that emotion. And for that emotion, those neurohormones to be released into your bloodstream again.
So I know I think it will be really great. We should show the video, show Josh's video. What advice can you give, Sue? I mean, what can I do? Because I might know about this, I might be aware of this, I know this happens in my brain. What can I do in those 6 seconds to actually prevent this from happening to me, or to change the emotion, as you've said? Share some strategies with us.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, the model itself is a strategy to preempt this. So when we're having these emotional reactions, we have this, what we would say is like a reaction cycle. So we're reacting, there's a trigger and we react. And that emotional response will continue to go up and up and up and up. And what happens when you're not paying attention on an escalator that's just going up? You'll fall off and you'll hurt yourself. And ultimately, that's really a metaphor for not paying attention to your emotional intelligence. So the model itself gives us a tool to get off that escalator, because we have choice points in this reaction cycle. We have choice points where we can get off before it actually happens. So we can choose to preempt. So that's where the model itself comes into play, where we can create different options to something that we find ourselves reacting to a lot, so that we've created these neural pathways in advance to do that. Then, of course, the trigger might happen and we react. Then ultimately we have 6 seconds to de-escalate, to get off that escalator that's taking us up. So in that 6 seconds, we have something called a 6 second pause. Now, it's interesting because my mum used to say, count to 10.
Yes, mine too.
Yes, but ultimately it doesn't work because it's too easy. So if we think of the different areas of the brain, we have our cortical brain, which is our higher order thinking brain, particularly the prefrontal cortex. So what happens is when we have this emotional hijack, when we react in 0.25 of a second, our thinking brain is cut off and it goes straight to our feeling brain. So we need, in that window of opportunity, that 6 seconds, to reconnect our thinking and our feeling brain together. So you need to do something in that 6 seconds to engage this prefrontal cortex. So to kind of distract, and then we can choose to de-escalate. So for example, a 6 second pause can't be something that's too easy, like count to 10, because we just do it. We don't need to think about it. We don't need to use this prefrontal cortex. So it's something like mine at the moment, because I'm so bad at foreign languages. I am counting backwards from 10 in Spanish. Now, it's something that's not entirely alien to me. I have some access to it, so I can access it in those moments, but it's something that I haven't mastered yet. So I need to engage this part of my brain in it. Children can do it. So for example, some children that I've known over the years, they've used their 6 favorite dog breeds or their 6 favorite Disney films, or you can think about, 6 places that are on your bucket list. You can think about anything that you have some connection with, and this is why we need to do it in advance. Because in that 0.25 of a second, if you don't have an alternative pathway, you're just going to react. So we need to think about this in advance, but not practice it too much that it becomes second nature.
So the moment you have second nature, you must choose something else. And that might be telling you something as well, that you are getting aroused and angry too often.
Yeah, absolutely. And when my language skills improve, I'll have to choose something else. But it's ultimately what it's doing is giving you that window of opportunity to then de-escalate and to choose to feel something different. Because people think you can't do that, but you can. You can choose your thoughts, your feelings, and your actions. And those 3 things are ultimately combined. So if you change your thought, you can change the emotion and you can change the action. Or even if you change the action, you change your feeling and you change your thought. So these 3 things are all interlinked, but ultimately, and we have a great tool called the TFA cards, and we've got this on an app now that's available. And at any given moment, you can just analyze, your choices, and you pop in there what you think, feel, and act normally in response to a stimulus, your pattern. And then you ultimately can choose to change the thought, the feeling, or the action, and then look at the knock-on effect of just changing one of those things. So there are lots of things you can do.
What it comes down to is this, to me, is what we've started off with when you gave a definition of emotional intelligence. It's about using your feelings smartly, or being smart about your feelings. And it is that feeling that I'm not helpless, I'm not a hostage to my emotions. I can make choices, and I do make choices. I choose how I'm going to behave, and I choose how I'm going to feel. And so many people don't want to take that responsibility, because it's easier to say, can't help it, look what they've made me do. And that, if we all can just take that responsibility, imagine what could happen in the world. And I guess that leads me to the ambition or the vision of the 6 Seconds organization.
Yeah, so absolutely. We believe that, and we know that we do have choices. And you're right, Del Marie, that when we acknowledge that we are the ones that are accountable for our behaviors. We are the ones that are accountable for what we do, and we can change and we can choose to be smarter. We believe that when people are doing that, the world will ultimately be a better place, because we will have more insights, we will have more connection, we will have more purpose. And our vision is to have 1 billion people practicing the skills of emotional intelligence by the time our president, Annabelle Jensen, is 100. And so it's really something that we're passionate about and we see. And the way we're doing that is in forming partnerships with organizations, partnerships with individuals, and we want to empower other people to do that. So that's why we have our certification programs, so that people can take these tools, take these methodologies, embed them into their organizations or embed them into their consultancies and utilize them to support other people to become more emotionally intelligent. And ultimately, that's our aim and our vision. And we do that in many ways. We do lots of free things as well. We're a not-for-profit organization. So we partner with UNICEF. We have created something called pop-up festivals. And these pop-up festivals are available to anybody, anywhere in the world. And on United Nations Children's Day, the pop-up festivals are held around the world. Last year we had 1.5 million people engage in these pop-up festivals, and they're to help support the United Nations, the Sustainable Development Goals, again, through people making better choices and decisions and being smarter with their emotions. And these pop-up festivals are for children, for adults, and it was just so inspiring to see that 1.5 million people had access to this really amazing fun set of activities that they can utilize with a classroom or in an organization or just in a family. And this year we were hoping for 3 million people, and we're still hoping for 3 million people. They're just going to be doing it slightly differently and I don't like the word social isolation. I think it's more physical distancing. But we've seen that so much is possible, and we've seen a lot of wonderful things come out of this time. And I think in this time of change, some of the biggest shifts in technology, some of the biggest shifts in the ways of doing things happen in a crisis. And I think that we're seeing some of those things coming through now. And I think that we're seeing technology as a way to engage people. And we can do that also emotionally intelligently. So
Yes.
yeah, that's our big vision, and we're on track to be achieving that. And we want to thank everybody for going out there and practicing and supporting other people to practice, because we create a community, we're a network of people that support one another to do this. And we have experts in every field you could think of. So if anybody wants help or support in integrating this into their organizations or families or schools, then please do let us know, because we have some experts somewhere in the world that will be able to help them to do this.
That's so encouraging, and it's very true that, again, it comes back to choice and optimism. When find yourself in the situation where you can't go to work, you're at home, it's a choice whether you're going to sit in front of the television and watch Netflix one episode after the other. It's a choice that you are making. It's a choice whether you want to grab onto these opportunities that you have mentioned as well. Get involved, do an online course, get certified, take up a new job. You might have lost what you were doing before but there are so many opportunities out there for you to reinvent your life, to find new purpose, to empower yourself. And this is what I love about your organization, because I find that for me it's very aligned with what we're trying to do through this conference: networking, empowering, informing, giving people a vehicle to be part of something that's bigger than themselves. making them feel that they can make a difference in the world rather than just feeling helpless victims. And one thing I'm definitely going to advocate that you just said is, let's not use the term social isolation, but rather physical distancing. Because I think, as you talked about those pathways in the brain, the more children and people hear this phrase, social isolation, it has an impact on how you perceive the world around you. But something like physical distance doesn't have that emotional or that laden emotion that's built into it, because as human beings, we're wired for connection, and we're wired
Absolutely.
for collaboration. And having a vision to have 1 billion people practicing emotional intelligence is so amazing, and will definitely impact on the achievement of the United Nations sustainability goals, because that is also one of the things that we are trying to achieve in this conference. I want to just ask one last question, or two. Actually, I've got two questions. The one is around women.
Mm.
So often people are saying women are more emotional, or on a positive side, women are more able to talk about emotions, women are more in touch with their feelings. And a good example to me is a politician, Jacinda Ardern from um, New Zealand, who is, she herself says she's been accused of being too emotional, yet look at what she's achieved as a politician, who in the first year of her being in that position has had to deal with a mass shooting, with earthquakes, with volcanic eruptions, with COVID. And why is it that people are saying this about women?
Mm. I mean, it's really interesting because when we look at the data around the 8 competencies, we can see that there are differences between men and women in
Yeah.
terms of where their strengths lie. But again, this isn't to do with being over emotional or being, because that's not being emotionally intelligent, but it's actually about how we utilize these. And I mean, it's hard to comment really on societal perceptions of men and women, but I think ultimately we have our strengths and we have our areas that we can possibly enhance, both men and women.
Yes.
And I think going back to the point about having a baseline, knowing where you personally are, then I think that's really important to help you to utilize all of these competencies so that you have a balance in terms of that self-awareness, that self-management, that self-direction, so that you can ultimately optimize on that. And I think we have some, not wanting to get into politics either too much, but we have some fabulous examples of politicians, and we have some unfortunate examples of politicians as well. And I think ultimately, if we measured their emotional intelligence, I'd love to do so. I'm sure some of them wouldn't want me to. But ultimately, if we measured their emotional intelligence, I think we could kind of hypothesize where their strengths would lie. I mean, going to Jacinda, I think in terms of her empathy levels would be particularly high, or we would call them skilled or expert. I would imagine that that would be the case. However, it's not just that she's got those empathy levels, it's the ability to actually engage with what is that purpose, what is that value system, ultimately what does. And I think that's why we saw her responding so quickly with banning guns, and bringing the law change very quickly around that, because that was aligned to a value, a bigger purpose, whilst at the same time engaging that empathy. Then the red area, basically, I think maybe it was the other way around, where she then went to, what am I thinking? What am I feeling? Then what is my purpose and what is going to be best for the whole country here? And then to the red area to create options and to be able to navigate that emotional data to say, yes, some people are feeling this, some people are feeling that, some people are feeling the other. But ultimately, what do we believe as a government is the best outcome in this area. So I think in terms of utilizing emotional intelligence, the politicians that we're seeing that are doing so, or leaders of organizations or in families or in schools, the people that we're seeing that are having the most positive influence are those that are utilizing this model. And I think there are, when we look at mass statistics, you know, there are differences, but ultimately we are all different. So I will have different strengths to yourself. And I think another important thing is not to compare that, but to think, you know, where am I at this moment in time? Am I functional, you know, which means on a daily basis I can access this, but if something stressful comes along, I might be struggling. Am I skilled in this? Is it something I can tap into? Or am I overutilizing some of these?
Yes.
So we can overutilize also. So for example, if somebody is very empathic and yet doesn't have some of the other competencies at the same level, they could be people that just say yes because they feel uncomfortable with other people's emotional data and just want to please. So we need to get that balance. So it's not just about having the highest score, it's about utilization, which is why we say with this model, it's measurable to give you that baseline. Then it's learnable. Let me learn more about this so I can become smarter with that emotional data. And then it's actionable. Let me go out there today and action some of this in every interaction that I have in every area of my life.
That is a very encouraging end to this conversation. I think it should fill people with actionable ideas that they can follow up on. And we want to encourage them to reach out to you, to go onto the 6 Seconds website and look at all the free tools you're offering, but also these opportunities to upskill yourself, to empower yourself, to change your career, or actually to just, you know, implement this in your own organization. Thank
Yeah,
you very much.
absolutely.
That's been really, really exciting. Now, across our conference, across the 5 days, Sue, we've identified 4 themes that connect across the future of work, future of skills, future of schools, future of money, and sustainability. And one of those themes is the importance of empathy and compassion. Which we believe is really important. And Malika Pulraj in her session, for example, speaks about the importance of being emotionally intelligent in making those financial decisions. Then another one is inclusion. And I think your model, the 6 Seconds model, provides a fantastic framework for inclusion and looking at inclusion in your workplace and in your life. So I think that's something that people can really, should really consider. Then we also look at the importance of leadership, which you've also spoken about. And lastly, the impact of technology. So these are all 4 themes that I think are very related to what you've been talking about. And in our conference, one of the things, even though these sessions are pre-recorded, there is an opportunity for people to engage with each other, to reflect, to collaborate, to form new partnerships, as you've also mentioned, to also raise some questions. And I wondered if you have a question for the audience that you think that would be interesting to you for them to respond to by using the Headspace app, where they can make a short little video and give you a response. What question would you want to ask our participants?
Well, I would love actually, you know, on this theme of actionable, I would love for the participants just to think about this know yourself, choose yourself, and give yourself. So this self-awareness, self-management, and self-direction. And I'd love to hear from them about when they make the best decisions and choices. You know, how aware are they of themselves and of others, and how are they making those choices? So I think what I'd like, if they're going to make little video clips and things, is to share about a great decision that they made. What was a great decision that had a positive impact on themselves and on others. So it would be wonderful to hear about those outcomes and the success that people are finding with utilizing their emotional intelligence when they're utilizing data.
That is a very positive and encouraging question, and I think people can learn from each other by listening to these stories. Thank you so much for this very, very informative session, for sharing your wisdom and inspiring us into realizing that we can make a difference, that we can act, that we can be more smarter with our feelings. And I hope that we will find that a lot of new collaborations and a lot of new interactions will happen as a result of this.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. And yes, I think it's so important for people to share their wisdom with one another. So those video clips would be great just to give people some tips and some tools. And I'd just like to also say, be kind to yourself, because you're not always going to make the right decisions and choices, but it's okay. And we do get it wrong. And emotional intelligence allows us to recognize that and to say, let me do it differently next time. And that's smart and that's growth. So thank you so much for the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Hi, my name's Dr. Sue McNamara, and I am delighted to be taking part in the Inspired Conference. I'm going to be talking about how you can utilize your emotional intelligence in order to make better decisions and better choices so that you can create more insight, connection, and purpose for yourself and to support other people to do that also, whether that be personally, professionally, in an educational organization or a corporate organization, just so that you can learn to be smarter with your emotions. Thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you.